What we saying, guys? Enlight here, back with another video today. Again, we're trying new things. We're creating different vibes, and today we've got our first ever tier list video. It's going to be on the guns of Apex Legends Season 8. There's a lot of discussion around the guns at the moment with all the buffs and the nerfs happening and the current state of the game. And so I thought I would give you my opinions on the guns of the game. These aren't necessarily objectively best guns, worst guns. It's my preference in my style of play, should we say. Because obviously there are certain guns that are high caliber, high skill that I personally don't use because I know that I'm not good enough at the game, right? I'm quite a passive player. I'm a player that likes a bit of forgiveness, and certain guns don't offer that to me. And so this tier list is a reflection of maybe not necessarily a beginner's guide to Season 8 guns, but a sort of a mid-range casual player's tier list, shall we say. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So, you may notice the guns at the bottom of the screen here. There's a couple of gold ones, which are the Kraber and Mastiff. The guns are from a while ago, because I couldn't find a tier list that was relevant to Season 8, but I also couldn't be bothered to make all the icons. So we've nicked this one. There are a couple of guns missing that I will show you where I would put, although there won't actually be anything in the slots. I know two that are missing are the Volt and the Charge Rifle, and I'm not sure there's any more, but if there is, feel free to let me know. Right, before we start listing the videos, I'm going to go down the 7 tiers that we have. 7 may be a bit overkill, but deal with it, alright? So, we'll work from the bottom. Rather use fists for those where the guns really aren't worth using, especially in those close quarters situations off the drop where a 30 damage fist might be just as good, right? The next tier up is terrible. That speaks for itself. It's a terrible gun. I don't want to be picking that up. In fact, I probably won't be. The next one up is not ideal. Again, quite simple. Usable is a gun that I'd prefer something better, but we move. Decent is obviously decent. I don't mind taking it. These are mainly for guns that I might not want to take into the late game, but if I do have to, it's not the end of the world. Second to top is Shredder. These are the guns that shred all the enemies. Very, very good guns, but not quite the creme de la creme of the God gun tier. So we'll start in order of the guns that are on here. So we shall start with the Alternator. Now the Alternator is a strange gun because on face value, it's not great. The fire rate is slow. The damage is all right, but nothing to write home about. If you do take it into the late game, you will be at a slight disadvantage, but it's not one of those that you can't use completely. If you get it off the drop early on, you got a fair chance of getting out of that first fight whilst doing some significant damage along the way. And for that reason, the Alternator is going into decent. Is it going into decent? Yeah, do you know what? We'll make some changes at the end if we have to. It's going into decent for now, because I wouldn't mind it. Right, second gun on the list is the Spitfire, and this could divide opinion, but you do have to remember I said that this was a tier list for the beginner to mid casual player, offering forgiveness and good damage, and for that reason, the Spitfire goes straight into God Gun. I'm sorry, it goes straight into God Gun. This gun is a joke. It does about 20 damage, 19 to 20 damage a bullet, depending on the legend, whether they've got low profile or not, shall we say. It's with a purple mag, it's got 55 bullets in a magazine. So even if you miss those shots at the beginning, you've got so much time to drag it back onto the enemies, and it's so forgiving. It's a fantastic gun. It hits really hard, and I win so many fights with it. So you can't change my mind on that. The Spitfire is a god gun. And then in complete comparison with the Spitfire, we have the Wingman. Now, again, please do not crucify me, but I cannot stand this gun. I see all the pros and the high tier players, the high rank players, swearing by the Wingman and using it all the time. I can't use it. I'm happy to admit that. Alright, I'm happy to admit that I do not have the skill set to use the Wingman. It does 45 damage a shot, which is incredible, right? It's incredibly hard hitting, but I can't hit my shots, and if I'm not going to hit my shots, I'm not going to take it. Objectively, the Wingman should be around shredder to decent, in my opinion. However, because it's me, it's going in terrible. It's going in terrible. I'm sorry. It's going in terrible. Because I just don't... I'd pick almost anything up other than the Wingman. Which I know is going to divide opinion, but I do not care. Right, the next gun on the list is the G7 Scout. And I've got to say, it's very middle of the road. I used to use the Scout a lot at the start of the game because it was insane damage numbers. You can put a sniper scope on it and you could really get that long range damage where the people aren't going to be hitting you back, right? It feels like the Scout's got less and less usable as the game's gone on, but it's still a good gun. Do you know what? It fits one of these tiers perfectly for me. Usable. It is a usable gun. Don't get me wrong. Potentially not great off the drop because it's a single fire, but it's a usable gun. It fits that perfect. It's middle of the road. I wouldn't be unhappy. I'd want to pick something else, but if I had to use a Scout, I wouldn't complain. I wouldn't complain. Now I've got another one here that's going to probably divide opinion. It's the triple take. If you have watched my videos, especially the "Is this the best gun in Apex Legends" video, you will know that this is honestly one of my favourite guns in the game. I'm going to try and be objective because I do take the triple take in almost every game I play. And I couldn't tell you why. But it's good. It's very, very good in my opinion. If you want to farm damage, this is the gun, right? It's between shredder and decent for me. It's between here. I think I'm going to put it, for the time being, in shredder. Because you can, like, 3-tap and it, like, yeah. It's a good gun. If you put a 2 to 4 or a 3 on it, it's a serious bit of kit. Right, we move on to the RE45 here, which... This is going to look so cliche because it just looks like I'm putting one in every tier. But I'm going to put the RE45 in not ideal. Don't get me wrong here. It does shred occasionally. It's good off the drop when other people have maybe got the lower tier guns that we'll come on to next. But up against something like an R99, an alternator 301, a flatlight, almost anything, to be honest, it's going to get outpowered. You do not want to be taking an RE45 into the late game because you just will not have the hitting power to kill the enemies. To be honest with you, it's not going to happen. I talk about the hop-ups. If you put a quick draw on it, it's still not ideal because the quick draw is pointless. As we all know, the RE45 is not ideal. We then come to that gun I was on about when I said that the RE45 might be able to beat this gun, and it's the P2020. We're going to stick it straight away and rather use fists. I don't think anyone is surprised by this. The gun itself is terrible. It's not good. If you put a hammer point on it, it will obviously be somewhere around usable, not ideal, because it does do some serious damage, but we're only going to look at the base guns in this tier list video. The P2020, I understand why it's in the game, because you've got to have high tier and low tier guns, but there's no one that just takes the P2020, is there? There isn't. You don't take the P2020. You just don't. We move on to our first care package weapon of Season 8, and that's the Prowler SMG. Obviously, In previous seasons, the Prowler has been a heavy gun. And to think that it was ever allowed out of care packages is arguably obscene. It's with or without a select fire. Back when the select fire was a thing, this gun was a joke. It was a joke. You'd pick it up all the time. You'd smash everyone. It's incredible. And now it's a care package weapon. It automatically goes in God Gun. It automatically goes in God Gun. There's no debate. We move on to our first shotgun of the episode. I'm not convinced about the Eva 8. Despite the Mastiff nerf, the Eva 8 still remains average at best. It's got a good firepower, but its damage per hit is never enough for me, and I don't know whether that's the gun or the person manning the gun, right? But as it's a reflection of my games and my ability, the Eva 8 is going in not ideal. Only because I can't really use it. It's just not the one for me. I'm not a very close quarters player. As I said, the triple takes in shredder, for God's sake. You know where I'm going with this. I like to keep my distance. I'm not good close up. I do need to work on that. But as it stands, the Eva 8 is in not ideal. It seems that we've got all the shotguns in one go. So we move on to the second rather used fist gun, and that is the Mozambique shotgun. It's terrible. It's terrible. It doesn't do enough damage. It's 4 shots. So you miss one, you're done. A lot of arguably quite big YouTubers have made videos on the gold Mozambique saying that it's now the best shotgun with the Mastiff nerf, and I cannot agree less. The hammer point is good, of course it is, but the mags, like the capacity of the Mozambique having 4 shots means that if you miss one, you're not killing them and you're just left in the bin. So no more explaining on that. The Mozambique's in rather used fists. We then come on to the Mastiff shotgun. I know it's in gold here because it used to be a care package weapon when this tier was created, but it's floor loot in Season 8, and it has recently been subject to a nerf. At the start of Season 8, the Mastiff shotgun was ridiculously powerful. The pellet damage, each pellet did 14, I believe. It was 13 or 14, and that's now been reduced to 11, which is it's a considerable downgrade, right? It's still very good. If you hit enough pellets, it's going to do some serious damage. As I say, don't use shotguns very often, but I would consider the Mastiff. And for that reason, it's going in decent, because I don't use it very often, but it is one that I use. I think decent solid for it. We move on to another one that sort of divides opinion, and that's the Hemlock, right? The Hemlock is a very good gun. There's no disputing that. But you will never see me use it. Why that is, I can't tell you. I just prefer other guns in this game. The Hemlock, I just like full auto. I'll be honest with you, I just like having a full auto gun, and the Hemlock doesn't quite do it for me. However, if we look objectively, it does shred. And so I've now got to decide whether I'm going to go objective or stick with my subjective. I'm going to go subjective, and I'm going to say it's decent. Objectively, it's shredder, because it does shred. And if you go back and watch my hardest carry video, the teammate I had was using the Hemlock, and they were hitting so much. They did 4k damage, obviously, with the Hemlock. And so, yeah, it's decent. We move on to the Devotion. Now, the Devotion is a good talking point as to whether the turbocharger boosts it even higher than I'm going to boost it, right? The Devotion has become one of my new favourite guns, purely because the fire rate is incredible. It's similar to the Spitfire in that if you start missing your shots, you've got plenty of bullets to get it back on. It's a bit harder to use than the Spitfire, but when you're firing that many bullets in such short amount of time, you can do anything. And for that reason, It's a shredder. It's a shredder. It's not a god gun. With a turbocharger maybe, but we're doing base guns. We're doing base guns. A turbocharger would put it in god gun, but it's gone in shredder. Kraber, nothing to say about it. It's a god gun. Anything that can one tap kill is a god gun. Like, there's no disputing that. I'm not even going to stick on it for too long. It's a god gun. If you hit a headshot, you kill someone. That's a god gun. We move on to the Havoc, and now the Havoc is an interesting one because it seems to get ignored by a lot of the Apex community, and it is clear to see why. It's one of the ARs that doesn't have a barrel stabilizer, like the Flatline, but it almost feels like the Havoc's recoil is so much worse than the rest of the ARs. It also comes with a turbocharger, but I've got to forget about that because we're using base guns. I'm not sure I can put it any higher than usable, like without a turbocharger. The base gun itself, obviously no barrel stabilizer. It's got a good mag capacity, and it hits. I'm putting it in decent. It's not my personal favourite gun, but it's a decent gun. Objectively and subjectively, it's decent. It's decent. There's not much more to say. It's decent. Now, we come to our second controversial gun of the episode, and that's the R99. I've put the Wingman in terrible, and I'm not sure whether I should put the R99 in terrible as well. No. Do you know what? Obviously, those of you that are skilled at the game will hate me for this, but it's going in not ideal. And that's purely through personal preference, and personal preference alone. The R99 can one clip, which makes it a shredder. Objectively, you've heard objectively and subjectively way too much, but objectively, it's a shredder. However, it's a very high caliber gun, like the Wingman. It's very hard to use. If you're good at the game, you're going to rinse people with it. But as I said, for a beginner to average casual gamer, the R99 is a bit too high tariff for me. Personally, I would prefer to use an alternator over the R99 because it offers a bit more forgiveness. And forgiveness is what you're looking for, isn't it, really? We move on to the Flatline, and I'm debating the Flatline a lot because I looked at this before I started recording, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's up there. I think, is it a god gun? It's not. I'm gonna put it in shredder, purely for its recoil at mid to long range. Right, up close, the Flatline is a god gun. Like, it hits so hard. I think it's 20 per shot. Obviously 40 for a headshot. I think it is. I'll put a stat up if I'm wrong. It does a lot of damage up close, and the recoil, because the recoil's so bad, up close the effects of recoil are negated. So you hit a lot of shots and you rinse people, right? But there's SMGs that do it better, but there's not an AR that does it as bad. I know that's complicated. At medium range, there's other guns I'd prefer to use than the Flatline. And considering it's an AR, I think that it's a little bit weak in that department. And that is the only reason I've put it in shredder and not god gun, because it is incredible. But there's other guns I'd like to use at mid-range, and we'll come on to those. There's 3 left on here. Obviously, I've got the Volt and the Charge Rifle to put in as well. But we move on to the Longbow, and again, it's going in not ideal. I used to be a huge fan of the Longbow. Because I like to stay away from fights, it was so ideal for me. If we were talking hock-ups, brilliant, Kieran. If we were talking about hop-ups and putting the Skull Piercer on the Longbow, I'd move it up into the usable category. However, the base gun itself is, it's a scout that does a little bit more damage, but takes a lot longer to fire. And for that reason, it's one below. It's in not ideal. The R301 Carbine is my favourite gun in the game. Ask Tom as well. It's our favourite gun in the game. It is the most all-rounded gun. It's amazing. It's amazing. The recoil is so easy to control. It does enough damage. Its fire rate's good. It's a jack of all trades. Master of quite a few. It's going in God Gun. It's going at the top of Good Gun as well. It's my favourite gun in the game. Now it takes us to the last the gun on here, which is the Peacekeeper, which of course is a care package weapon. As someone that doesn't like shotguns, you might be thinking it's going to be decent to usable, right? And you'd be right up until about 2 weeks ago when I saw an old video of the Peacekeeper. I can't remember who it was by. I might put something up on the screen now to show you it's by, and I'll find the video. But the range of the Peacekeeper with the choke on it is unreal. It acts as a sniper, essentially. But this video was 1.5 years old, and I didn't know whether this was still a thing. So I went to the firing range, as all prospective Apex players do, and I tried it out myself. And yep, it's still in the game. And for that reason, it's a God Gun. It's a shotgun that can be a sniper. It can do damage from anywhere, and I don't want to come up against that. So for that reason, it's God Gun. Right, obviously there's two that aren't on here. We'll start with the charge rifle, and I'm putting that in terrible. It's just pointless for me, personally. It's one of those that if someone's standing still, then fair enough. But the amount of times I've been tickled, absolutely tickled by a charge rifle on, the initial beam before it fires properly, obviously does a little bit of damage. The amount of times I've been tickled for about 5. What's the point? What's the point? I understand it in ranked because I've never played ranked, really. I've played maybe 5 games ever in bronze rank because we didn't play ranked. I understand it in ranked because you get XP for damage, and it will do damage if you just fire that all game. But objectively and subjectively, it's a shit gun. It's a terrible gun. It's not quite rather use fists, but it's up there. It's very close to. So I think the final gun of the episode is the Volt SMG. I believe, again, leave it in the comments if I've missed one, and I might reply to you and tell you where I'd put it, and we might be able to have a little thing. It's going in Shredder for me, the Volt. It used to be a God Gun. Maybe, was it in the beginning of Season 8 it used to be a God Gun? Did it get nerfed? I think it got nerfed at the start of Season 8, because we were using it in Season 7. And it was mental. And then they only nerfed it by like 1 damage less per shot, but it just doesn't feel as good now. I don't know why. That could just be us. But it's going in Shredder. It's going in Shredder. That's about all there is to say to it. It's a very good gun. So that was my completed Apex Legends Season 8 tier list for the weapons. Here's the finished article. Obviously, add the Volt and the charge rifle in Shredder and Terrible, respectively. But this is it. Let me know in the comments what I got wrong, and let me know what you agree with, and maybe where you'd put certain things. If you like the video, obviously, feel free to subscribe. You've heard it a million times before from a million other creators, but it would mean the world to me. If you like the video, click like, because again, I'd like you to. And that's me. I shall see you next week for the next main video on the channel, and stay tuned for the 2 shorts that come in midweek. Until then, stay safe, and I will see yous in a bit.